All right. Randy Towe. It's great to see you on the Millhouse podcast.
Man, I'm happy to be a part of it.
We go way back together.
That we do.
I remember the first time I met you. I think I was fishing with Harry, and we were in Key West for a bay bone with a slam. I saw you walking across the lobby, and I thought, wow, that's Randy Towe.
Well,
and that was my first because I'd been fishing with Harry for quite a while, but I've never been around tournaments, and I was just so overwhelmed by everybody. You know, all you guys had such great names in this world. It's great to have you on the podcast. We can talk about a little bit of tournaments that we fished against each other through the years. But before we get into all that, I know that you were very close to a dear friend of all of ours, Billy Knowles, who passed this last year or just recently. Talk to me about Billy and what kind of a special man he was and what kind of a relationship you had with him.
well, when I first moved here, he was one of the very first that was known, being a guide, lived down here, and kind of took me under his wing, actually through Hal Chittum. And when I moved here, I had a rod shop where I was building rods, and I was fishing on a charter boat out of Bud Mary's called the It's Okay with Oz Keggy. Moved down with him in the early 80s. And Chittum was coming by because he liked the fishing rods, and he says, hey, I got a couple of friends of mine that want to come check your stuff out. So he brought over Billy Knowles and Hank Brown. So Billy and I just hit it off. We just kind of had the same ideas and shared the same passions. And over the years, we developed a really strong friendship and bond, like a father figure.
That's what I thought.
Really.
Did he... You guys first started fishing the Cape before most people. I think Billy was one of the first ones out on that side of the water. Was he helping you as far as your fishing career, as where to fish, how to fish?
What was interesting with Billy, for example, he'd never tell me where to go. He'd never say, go do this or go do that. He would tell me, son, go do your homework, and you go figure it out. And I'd be like, but figure it out where? Where? To the left, to the right? 100 yards, 500 yards? He goes, you'll figure it out.
Did you ever chase him out there and find out where he was going?
No, I didn't have to chase him because,
his boat was too fast.
Well, it was at times. And, when mine was faster, he didn't like it. And when his was faster, he was, a peacock.
So what happens if you ask them, do you like this spot on a low tide or a high tide or a falling or a rising? If you asked him those questions, would he be very willing to give you the answers and to his experience?
Not really. No, not really. We would talk about it, and looking back at this, and I met Billy 40 years ago, and we talked every day. That was one of the things that is real hard for me right now is not talking to him. I pick up my phone, I go to call him. He's not here. Just every day we talked about something, and back then it was the same. What'd you see? And I would tell him what I saw, and he would kind of tell me his version of it.
You should have told him, do your homework.
No, ask
me what you saw.
I wouldn't disrespect him.
Yeah, for sure.
And it would, maybe after a while it would have been funny, but in the beginning I was a sponge. I was just taking in everything that was happening. And, he really laid the groundwork as a guide, how to build a business and how to keep your people coming back. And that guy on the bow of your boat is number one right now. He's paying you money to go fishing. You do everything you can to make it work, and you have a good day with him because you want him back. Mm-hmm. And he was really big on the repeat business and how to structure that and how to talk. You get back to the Lorelei, you put your boat on the trailer, you go home. You don't go up there and tell everybody what you did. If your customers want to go up there and talk about your day, that's fine. So my life, I would come in from fishing. I would put my boat on the trailer. I'd go home. Usually had fishing rods to do. And then later on had a family and, had responsibility there. But I didn't spend any time at the bar at Lorelei. I mean, every now and then I might have a beer with somebody, an old friend or something. But he instilled a lot of the structure to be a professional guide and to be good at your business with how to treat your customers. He was big on that.
So he was your biggest mentor then?
Oh, 100% back then. And when we talk about spots, it was kind of interesting because when you talk about fishing the Cape and all that stuff, I educated him, toward the end. And Azo and I, when we had our reign in the Holly and a lot of the stuff we did out there, we really figured some things out that I shared with Billy, and I didn't get there because I didn't talk to him. I took what he was telling me and I applied it and I figured it out.
Who were the first people to fish out there on the Cape? I know Kenny Collette fished out there in the early years.
Yeah.
And Billy.
Kenny, Billy, Hank, I'm sure Harry was going out there. I'm sure Steve was there. You got to remember, I was with Azo one time, so it had to be late 80s. We were off, and it was crystal clear. I mean, it was like ocean fishing, and there was a school of tarpon coming from about 200 yards away. And I had seen Harry that morning, and he gave me a fly. He goes, man, if you see those tarpon back there, throw this. And it was a white rabbit with a yellow rabbit collar. So I said to Azo, and Azo had all his flies, and he was always prepared. I said, Azo, we got to put this fly on. So we put it on. I see him coming from a long, long ways. We get set up, and they eventually make it. He threw that fly, and the third fish jumped over the first one to eat it. And I thought, oh, my God, this is unbelievable. What a great fly. And we, it started from there. And you would get 10 shots, and you'd hook 8.
Was it that much different, that fly, compared to like maybe a big black fly that everybody has been known to throw out there for the most part?
We weren't using that because it was crystal clear.
Right.
So we changed to the darker flies in the muddy water, and when we started dredging, and
right.
If the wind was blowing out of the east at 20, it was probably going to be a good day back there.
Right.
Because you could, that fish the water would be a little off color, and they would bite so much better.
Right. And it's in the lee side there.
Yeah.
How long did that white rabbit strip last? Because like flies kind of have their window where they work well, really well. It's not that they're ever going to not work okay.
I don't know that it.
Did you win any tournaments back there with that fly?
Harry?
No, you. With Azo. I'm sure you kept throwing that over the years.
It just depended. It depended if we were dredging or if we were in dirty water or clear water. And then Azo had his own versions of things.
Right.
And I would always get on him and go, how many of these did you tie? He said, oh, just one. I go, you can't have just one. What happens when they eat it and we lose it? Oh, I don't know. So
Azo, I'm going to bring the audience into who Azo is, a Japanese angler. And we can talk about your introduction to Azo, but Azo and you won five hollies, 5 classic tarpon tournaments together. What was so to talk about that? How'd you get to know Azo? How did that come to be?
Well, believe it or not, Ted Jurasik was a great friend of mine, and he makes the Billy Pate reels and the T-bores. So back in the 80s, he was selling reels to Azo in Japan. He had a fly shop in Japan, and he says, hey, I got this guy from Japan coming that wants to go tarpon fishing. Maybe you could take him tarpon fishing and catch him a tarpon. I'm like, okay. So Azo comes into town, stayed at the Islander, and Ted was here, and we all got together, and, he introduced me and everything, and we started fishing. And Ted went with us a few times, hung out on the boat, and right from the get-go, Azo said, I want you to be my tarpon teacher. I want to learn how to catch tarpon.
Was he conscious and aware of tournaments at that time, or he just wanted to be a good tarpon fisherman?
He wanted to learn how to catch tarpon. I'm going to fish 40 days a year. Is that enough time?
And you said, that's a start.
I go, that'll get it started. So we started fishing together. And he would come, and it was, I want to say about 10 or 12 years fishing together. And then I started getting more serious about, I want to win one of these tarpon tournaments. I see all these tarpon. I know I can catch them. I need a guy that can get the job done. So I was fishing with a guy named Fred Arbona, who owned Climax Leaders back in the day. And he was a trout fisherman. Never really been to the Keys, never really tarpon fished, just a good angler. And I saw him at one of the shows, and I go, you're coming to Alamorada, and I want to take you tarpon fishing. He's like, oh, okay, that sounds like fun. So he came down, and the first time we fished together, he caught 17 tarpon one day on the ocean. And I said, Fred, next year we're going to fish the Holly tarpon tournament. I need an angler. You can get it done. He goes, oh, no, I don't do tournaments. I go, well, you're going to fish this one because I want to win one of these things. You got what it takes. I want to do it. So he had a company called Climax Leaders, and I was tying all this tarpon leaders, fly leaders, for tarpon fishing. I said, if we don't fish, you don't get any leaders. It's that simple. So against his will, he goes, all right, I'll come. No practice days, no fishing. I mean, we fished 2 days together, and one of them was that day. Comes back the next year to fish the Holly. Comes in Sunday, midday, kickoff. He's got a pair of shorts from Arizona that I don't think he'd really seen in a while that, he thought would be nice to wear. And he didn't bring much wardrobe. So he just came down. He goes, against his will, all right, I'm going to do this tarpon thing and let's go. So long story short, we're in contention to win the Holly on the last day. And Ralph Delph, and, back then the average team had about 10 to 12 fish to win it. And we were right in there with 9 or 10. Ralph Delph had 10 or 11. So we had to be on our game the last day if we wanted to win. Well, Arbona doesn't show up. So it's, 7 o'clock, everybody's gone, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Well, we don't have cell phones, so there was no way to get a hold of anybody. So about 10 o'clock, I see him walking down the dock at Papa Joe's. And he's got his hand out, like, don't even start with me. I overslept. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just the way it is. And I am fit to be tied. And, I was hungry. I wanted to win. I was competitive. I had 10 spots I wanted to be at, and I wasn't going to be at any of them. So he gets in the boat, and he goes, just go wherever you were going to be at 10 o'clock. I go, I have no idea where I was going to be at 10 o'clock. How about this? We're going to go see if we can find a parking spot somewhere because everybody's going to be at the good spots. So we leave, and I'm running. I'm thinking, how am I going to pull this off? Where am I going to go? And we went out toward Buchanan, and I'm looking, and there's 4 boats in the pocket and on that bank, and there's 2 boats out at the point. So I'm thinking, I wonder if anybody's on that very end. So I get out there. Nobody's on the end. So I pull up, and I go, all right, we got to give this a little time. Tide's right. We can certainly see now. We got great visibility, middle of the day. And here comes a school of fish. And he gets his rod out, and he's getting ready. And I can see the fish are going to go under the bow of the boat. And tide was falling pretty hard, so it was pushing them into us. And the fish go under the boat. And I'm thinking, well, maybe there'll be another school. So I kind of turn around, and I'm, getting back up on the platform, trying to get situated with what am I going to do. And the next thing I know, he's got him on. He makes this cast, going away, school of 10 or 15 tarpon, and that was his magic. He had, as he called it, I'm force feeding them. And he would make them eat it. He knew how to strip it. He knew how to wiggle it. We got him on. So we catch him. I get off the pole, and we go after him, and we catch him. And I go, well, maybe there's some, hope after all. And then we caught 2 more, and we won the Holly. So we ended up winning the tournament that day. We didn't leave the dock till 10 o'clock.
Well, was Azo the best tarpon fisherman you've ever had on your bow?
Yeah.
Or were you guys just the best team?
No, it was a combination. Azo was a machine. I mean, it was...
When you're dredging, he just threw and threw and threw and threw and threw.
Yeah.
There was no break.
No.
Relentless.
That's what he means by a machine.
Yeah.
Relentless, yeah.
So with Arbona, we won.
Yeah, how come he didn't win again? How come he didn't
He wasn't
defend?
coming back.
He was one and done.
He was one and done. I said, come on, you can't do that. Now, Azo and I hadn't made our deal yet. We're still fishing together. And Fred says, look, I'll come back to defend our title, but that's it. I'm not doing it again. And we ended up second place the next year. So now I need an angler. So we're at Key tarpon fishing, Azo and I had shown him the sargassum weed floating by. And I said, Azo, check this out. I picked up a bunch of weed, and I shook it on the platform of the boat, and the little shrimp and the crabs started falling out of it. You would have thought his finger went in the light socket. He's like, oh my God, holy, and he starts just, as fast as they would jump, he was eating them. And he thought this was the coolest thing. He's got a pile of seaweed this high. He's got his feet under my casting platform. He's shaking, and it's like a buffet.
He's having breakfast.
All you can eat.
Sushi time.
He thought this was the coolest thing he'd ever seen.
But he wasn't thinking about what the fish are going to eat, and this is what the fish are eating. He wanted to eat these things.
Oh no, he was like, oh, this is delicacy. This is really good. So he gets done, And I go, Hazo, next year, Tarpon tournament, Don Hawley, you and me. He stands up, and he turns around, he looks at me, and he bows to me. And he says, yes, my Tarpon teacher, I am ready for competition.
And he was. He went on with you to win 5 Hollies and 3 Gold Cups.
Yeah.
You know, he was a really great competitor and one of the kindest men ever that you'd see at the dock and around the, the banquets, the kickoffs, gracious in every way.
He was by the book in so many ways, on a personal level, competitive level, equipment, leaders. I mean, everything was perfect.
Well, if you take a look, what I'm fascinated by you, if you take a look at your track record, your tournament record, not only have you won the inshore tournaments and the Bay Bones as well, the Tarpon events, you haven't won a weightfish tournament. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you take a look at your offshore stuff, you won the Isla Morada Sailfly tournament, the Sailfish Challenge in Palm Beach, a payout of $160,000. Won the Swordfish tournament with 7 swordfish in 2 days. The Swordfish series 3 times you won. The Cat K Bahamas Wahoo tournament, the women's world record 4-pound tarpon record at 40 pounds. I mean, your resume of victories is outstanding. Why do you think you can go either to the west or out to the east and fish the blue water so well?
I just go fishing.
But that's easy to say.
Well,
how do you and you do your homework, but look, not anybody can go out and drop a line at 1,700 feet or 1,500 feet and catch a swordfish. Who was your mentor offshore? Billy was your mentor in the inshore area, but offshore you must have had somebody.
Offshore really for me wasn't hard because I grew up in Fort Lauderdale going offshore fishing.
With whom?
So, I didn't really have a father back then. My grandfather got me into fishing and baseball and all that stuff growing up. And then as I got older, there were guys in the neighborhood, older guys that, took me under their wing because they knew I could rig bait and I could do all the stuff that, they could drive the boat and we could go fishing. So I had a handful of guys in the neighborhood that had big center consoles, 25-foot center consoles. It was a big boat back then. That would take me fishing. So I kind of learned a lot of it as a kid, 16, 15, fishing the Fort Lauderdale Billfish Tournament, fishing the City Fishing Festival in Fort Lauderdale, growing up on the piers, snook fishing. So I kind of just was fishing all the time. So I adapted to all that stuff pretty easy. And then I got the opportunity to go to the Bahamas and be a mate on some of the big sport boats, which I thought was the coolest thing ever because I just loved that whole thing of the boats, the Marlin, catching big fish and the whole bit. So I kind of grew up with that. And I did that through probably the mid to late 80s, even when I was here tarpon fishing. So I got some good experience and kind of learned what to look for. And, unfortunately today, guys can look on the internet and learn about things pretty quick. But you need to know the fundamentals. You need to know the basics. You need to know this and this is what you look for that. And that's the information that's missing in today's world. So growing up, fishing, when you learn that recipe to fish, you can fish anywhere.
What are some of those nuances offshore that most people wouldn't understand what you're talking about? Some of the, when you run out there, birds and current and stuff like that, how do you read the ocean?
So if, for example, when I moved here, Billy would say, son, you need to learn how to read the birds. I always thought, what are you talking? Read the birds? How am I going to read the birds? They're flying around. I never got it. It took me 20 years to understand what reading the birds meant. And that meant when you see pelicans diving, they're on bait. When you see that pelican dive and come up out of the water, you can tell by the way he eats the bait, what he caught.
Right.
So this was part of reading the birds. Dolphin fishing, for example. When you are dolphin fishing looking for bigger dolphin, or nowadays just dolphin in general, you're looking for birds. So the birds are there because the dolphin are pushing the flying fish to the surface. So the fish are under the flying fish, chasing them under the birds. So now it's key to find that. Once you find that, are they going left or right? Meaning, are they going with the current or against the current? A lot of times your big dolphins swim into the current. A lot of times your small schoolie dolphin migrators, we call them, are going with the current up the road. So you could look at a set of birds and go, that's not what I want, and keep looking.
Look for a different kind of a bird reaction.
Correct.
To what you're...
Different behavior.
Right.
So the behavior of the bird is key in dolphin fishing, and guys like Brian Cohn have mastered how he reads the birds. And he'll go to 40 sets of birds, and he'll find that one that has a 40-pound dolphin under it.
Interesting. So all these big boats and captains, when they go out, they're not necessarily looking for water depth. Of course, they want to get in that neighborhood, but they're keying on birds.
Well, I think in the dolphin tournaments, they all have binoculars and stuff, right? They're always looking at the horizon.
Yeah.
But that's the number one key that everybody's targeting, the birds.
Yeah, because they're eliminating the mystery. They're getting you closer to the hunt than just blind trolling.
But that's for mahi. But is it the same with wahoo and sailfish and marlin too?
Not so much on wahoo, but certainly with sailfish and marlin. Man-of-war birds, they used to call them marlin birds. So a lot of times the same thing. Marlin or sailfish is pushing up bait. They're the birds. Here in the Keys, we have a lot of showering sailfish, and they're chasing the ballyhoos on the edge of the reef. So if you're looking down the reef and you see a blackbird, chances are there's something going on. So you check it out. And, so many people are oblivious to that. They drive right by it. And they go out to 130 feet and put their kite out or start trolling for a sailfish, and they just went by 6 of them that they didn't even know was there.
I've heard about this a lot, and Nikki and I have been offshore a little bit, understanding where to look for these things. But last year, it was very poignant to me when we were in Mags Bay, Mexico. We were down there rooster fishing, and you had all these seagulls up on a sandbar. And when the tide started falling, that's when all the sardines used to come in towards this edge and this bank, and all the pelicans started flying and diving. So they were all diving because the schools of jacks were pushing all the sardines. Well, a little bit later in the tide, now all of a sudden we saw the frigate birds. So the pelicans were in one location and the frigate birds were in front of the pelicans. We noticed the flying fish were out there under the frigate birds. And under the frigate birds were the flying fish and the rooster fish. Yeah. So the pelicans had all the jacks, the big schools of jack under the pelicans. But once you started to see the frigate birds flying, that's when we'd race over and get out in front of the frigate birds and fish for these flying fish, which had no chance, because if they were in the air, the frigate bird was going to eat it. Yep. If it was in the water, the rooster fish was going to eat it. He had no chance. It was the killing fields, if you were. And that's how we ended up targeting and catching these big rooster fish. It was all because of those birds and the timing of birds. Yeah,
timing is key. Finding them at the right time. If you're the first guy, around here, it's hard because there's a lot of traffic, and there's people that go from set to set to set of birds. So you might get under a school of birds and there's nothing there because the fish are pushed down. They've already been hit a few times, so they're not up on the surface, they're down. And if you've got a tower boat, sometimes you can see them down deep. So timing is key for that stuff, and sailfishing the same way. You get the sailfish on the edge of the reef, you get the sailfish out in the deeper water too, where they might be, balling a school of bait, school of sardines or something, and the man-of-war birds flying around. It happened to me here one year in a sailfish tournament. I saw a bird offshore, and I'm at Conch Reef with 25 other boats in a big tournament, and I see something going on, and nobody's leaving. And I slid out there, and unfortunately, in the sailfish tournaments, you'd have to report, I'm hooked up to a double, a quad. You can only fish 4 rods. So I knew going into this that as soon as I call in a quad, I'm going to be covered up. So we had to be prepared. And as I'm getting to this bird, I'm telling my mate, I'm telling everybody in the tournament, have every single rod ready to go. And we had like a dozen spinning rods ready to go. 12 pounds.
So that way, after you get those 4 fish in, you get 4 fresh rods.
Oh, yeah. So we go in there, and there were a dozen sailfish on the surface. And I don't know what they were on. Obviously, they were on bait or something, but they were just kind of mingling around. We throw 4 rods. We got the quad on. And I hesitated a little bit to call it in, but some of them were getting kind of close. We might get the release. So I called in, we're hooked up, quad. And it wasn't by the time we caught the first 4 that I was covered up with everybody. So we kind of had to jump on everybody because we got them. And I think we ended up with 7 out of the pack. And all 12 of our rods have little pigtails at the top. So the game was over. It was short-lived, but it was super exciting. And, that move right there was all because of a bird I saw offshore that looked like he was doing the right thing and no one else saw it.
Why do you have to report if you are hooked up?
That's just the way that the rules work here, because the committee boat has to acknowledge you're hooked up. You can't just, well, I guess you could call in, a release, but here usually it's followed up by, the release is followed up by hooked up so they can mark it and, know that you had a fish on and fought it for a period of time and landing it.
Do all the boats have observers on the boats?
No observers. Here in the Keys.
I think the big Marlin tournaments they do.
Yeah, and a lot of the Palm Beach tournaments they do.
I was going to say, if you had an observer, you wouldn't have to call it in because, you've got eyes on you anyway.
Yeah, but like you said, you get, you're hooked up to a quad, you call it in, and everyone wants to go where you're going because you just caught 4 fish.
I know.
Oh, yeah, and we're not even a mile away from them. And
can you imagine if that happened in the Gold Cup?
You get penalized for being a great fisherman because now all of a sudden your spot's gone.
Oh, yeah. Well, but that was the competitive edge. And as soon as I called that in, I could just see black smoke, from all these guys, Kalex and Relentless and everybody. They're
coming.
Because they got their eye on me already. Like, what's he doing out there? And how they didn't pick up on the bird, I don't know, because they usually see him before I would.
How much has kite fishing changed the game of sailfishing?
Kite fishing's been around a long time, and I don't know, hasn't really changed a lot other than it's just become the way to do it, especially north of here.
With the live goggle eyes.
Yeah, goggle eyes, sardines, thread fins, pilchards.
But you guys don't fly kites down here as much, do you?
We do. But most of the fish now, in the last 10 years, have been shallow, chasing bait. The tournaments that are winning right now are won by shallow fishing.
Sight fishing?
Sight fishing, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's casting to fish they see.
Yeah.
This might be surfing down sea or something.
Yeah. Well, no. When they shower, they start in about 100 feet.
Oh, so a shallow up on the reef, yeah.
And they start pushing this massive mat of ballyhoo inshore. And you just see it looks like it's raining ballyhoo.
Right.
And the birds are down and, all this stuff's going on. Well, there's this sailfish that's chasing these things. And you're trying to get to him. And you're trying to get a bait to him before he eats. Because once they feed, a lot of times they're not interested in your bait that you throw to them. So you got to have a good cast. And you got to get it in front of them and everything to get them to bite. And sometimes when there's more than one, they got that little competition. So you can hook up easier if there's more than one fish there.
But you have to chase them down with the boat to intercept that fish, right?
Oh, yeah.
Does the boat ever put those fish down?
No.
Or they're oblivious to it?
I think they're oblivious. You watch Alex Adler, Scott Stanzik, Paul on the Relentless, these guys are masters at doing that stuff. And they see a shower from a mile away, and somehow they can get to it and find where that fish is swimming and what he's doing and catch him. And sometimes they sit and they wait. They know it's coming, and that shower will happen. They'll be right in the middle of it.
How hard is it to get these fish to eat a fly?
Well, if you look at the scoreboard, pretty hard. A lot has to happen with a fly and a sailfish.
Especially an Atlantic sailfish.
Atlantics are very hard because we use live bait to tease them. Mm-hmm. Unlike in the Pacific where we do it, you troll, with lures or you troll with dead bait. It's a lot more user-friendly to get a bite out of one. And, with the live bait here, so many things can happen. He bites it, kills it. If you don't have another one instantly ready to go to re-tease him, the fish fades away. If he takes it off the wire, because you're not using hooks, you're wiring them on. If he takes it off the wire, he's gone. So then you got to get him from point A to point B, kind of like Pac-Man, where you're, winding that bait away slowly. The guy with the fly rod's getting ready. There's a very short window from when that ballyhoo comes out of the water and that sailfish is looking, where'd it go? And that fly has to be there, and he's got to be able to see it. So you really have to, everything's got to go right. and that fish has got to get close enough to the boat so you can throw to him. You can't throw to his face because he can't eat it head on. So you have to throw it off to the side so he, that side bite, going away bite is what you want.
Do you have a preference? I mean, you love bone fishing, but I think tarpon fishing was your favorite inshore fish. Chasing these offshore fish, obviously, the way you just explained it is fascinating. Do you have a preference of what fish you'd rather go catch in a given day?
I like.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't know. I'm a favorite with all of them when they cooperate.
Right.
And when they're biting. I hate sailfish when they don't bite. I hate it when, I throw at tarpon all day and I don't get a bite.
Let's just say you have the perfect offshore day and the perfect tarpon day.
Well, that's, the logo for this store is a sailpoon, which are my two favorite fish, a tarpon and a sailfish. And those two fish you can catch on a fly rod. And to me, that's one of the coolest things that I really enjoy doing. And it's special. Not everybody does it because a lot of people are intimidated. How can you catch a 100-pound tarpon on a fly rod? That's, they don't understand the mechanics of it and how it's possible. They don't understand how you can catch a sailfish. So some guys are great anglers and great sail fishermen, but they've never tried something different. They only know one way how to catch them the other way. So you're just changing it up a little bit, making it more interesting. And that's what I find fun about it. Mm-hmm. And it's a challenge, like all of it. And when you're successful, it's the greatest feeling to catch them on that type of tackle. I mean, if I never catch another one on bait, I'm happy.
Right.
It's something different, and it needs to be preserved in that it's different and it's special, and it means so much more to people than to go catch 10 sailfish. I mean, I love a 10 sailfish day in a tournament, but outside of that, what are you going to do with 10 sailfish? I mean, it's a great day.
Right.
Okay, but you have one more day to live. What are you fishing for? You got to give us that scenario. What are you fishing for? You have one more day.
If I had one more day, I would probably be in Casa Vieja trying to catch a black marlin on a fly rod.
Have you caught one before on a fly?
No.
A marlin on a fly before?
Oh, yeah. I caught a 300-pounder in Casa Vieja about 3 years ago.
Tell me about that fish.
3 hours and 45 minutes. Never jumped. And I had one on for the 3 days we were there. I had one on every day. And the third day, I was fishing with Chris Sheeter on the rum line, and he's since passed, but phenomenal captain. And he goes, "Randy, here comes your marlin again." And I'm like, "How big is it?" He goes, "Oh, you don't want to know." And I was like, "How bad could it be?"
How bad could it be?
Throw it out there, piles on it, and a blue marlin on a fly rod, is very aggressive. I mean, they do not mess around. When you throw it out there, they pile on it. It's not like they nip it or they think about biting it. They pile, out of the water, head and shoulders, down on this thing to eat it.
It's like a lion.
Oh, my
It's
gosh.
a piece of bait.
Super exciting to me, not for everybody, but for me. So I've got my Billy Pate bluefin reel that is a big arbor diameter, and it's shrinking to no end. And you can't have much tension when you're fly fishing, 20-pound tippet. So just the drag in the water can break your line.
Sure.
So we're about 3.5 hours into this. And Chris he took phenomenal pictures, had big cameras and all these big lenses, for his photos. And he was kind of looking, I see him up there looking through his camera. And I'm thinking, I wonder what he's looking at. And I'm, my line's straight down, and I've been in this position to where I'm not a happy guy. So he goes, "Hey, I see your fish behind the boat." He goes, "It's swimming on the surface. I see your fly." "Oh, really?" "It's back behind the boat." He goes, start reeling. I'm going to back up real slow." We back up, we back up, we back up, back up. Got all the way to where he was swimming. And he was on the surface just like I wasn't even there. And I've been pulling as hard as I could with what I had. And we got up there, and I'll never forget, it got to the left corner of the boat. I was in the left corner, and I kind of reached out, and I, kind of got the nail knot. And to myself, I'm thinking, all right, that's good enough for me.
Right.
And the fish kind of sank out, and he went under and came out the side of the boat. Well, Chris knew what was coming. And I look up, and he's got his camera ready to go, and he's got the lens, and he just started pushing the button. And this thing came out from the side of the boat, just going away, greyhounding, and you're looking at the back of this thing and the size of this marlin with a fly in his face, and he got some spectacular jumps of this fish going away. And after a couple of minutes of him jumping out of sight, the fly came out.
Perfect.
That's what I said.
Could happen in 20 minutes, but it's 3.5 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours and 45 minutes.
The techniques and the methodology of bill fishing, from what I understand, that you have a really heavy fly line, a heavy head, so that once that fish eats your fly, and during the fight, the fly line gets below the fish, which makes the fish want to swim to the surface. Am I correct with that?
Well, a lot of the lines they're using are shooting heads.
Right.
And very short. So depending on the grain, 500, 800 grain line, it can add a little weight. But to be honest with you, when you're fighting a sailfish, for example, a Pacific sailfish, you don't fight them that long.
Right, they flop around and get tired.
Yeah, most of these fish, you pull hard on them, 5 minutes,
Right.
10 minutes is a long fight. So it's interesting you say that, because I had one in the tournament this year. We have the sail fly in Casa Vieja, and he was wrapped up. Well, you can't grab, there's nothing to grab.
The leader's all wrapped around his body.
So part of the scoring is if you remove the fly, you get maximum points.
Right.
Well, I knew the way he was tangled up that we couldn't get the fly out. So I just free spooled it, and I just let the fish swim off with my line, and it all fell off.
Right.
Because of the weight of the line. And like you say, he was angling up a little bit,
Right.
but that line and that drag got him untangled. And a few minutes later, I started pulling on him, and he came back, and everybody just looked at me like, what just happened?
Right. Because I was reading this last week about Jake Jordan, of whom spent a lot of time with billfish in Costa Rica and Guatemala. And I guess that the idea is to use a really heavy fly line. In the past, I know that when I did it, we had just like a shooting head, but it was a floating line. But if the fly line is above and the pressure's coming from the fish from above, the fish wants to go down. It wants to sound. But if that fly line is heavy enough, and when you're fighting the fish with little drag, that heavy head gets below the fish and it makes him want to swim to the surface.
Yeah.
Against the resistance.
Against the resistance of the heavy fly line, which I found just fascinating.
Well, Jake is great. He's been all over the world catching these things, and a lot of blue marlin.
Right.
He's probably caught more blue marlin than anybody on a fly rod.
Right.
And, again, guy very passionate about fly fishing and what he does, and God bless him. I mean, he's still to this day goes to Costa Rica, goes to Guatemala. He's still at it.
When I see him at the trade shows, I give him a hard time because he comes in and he goes tarpon fishing. But the way he tarpon fishes, he fishes Bahia Honda in a falling tide at night.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, Jake, that is not tarpon fishing. If you can't see the fish before you chuck the fly, no, that's blind casting, that's trolling, that's dredging, but I can't help but bust his chops because he's at the age he doesn't want to pull a skiff down an edge, during the daylight hours. And that falling tide, there's thousands of fish under his boat, and he's going to catch a fish.
You ever tried it?
We've done it in different scenarios, different channels, and we love to do it.
Did you catch him?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I would rather just throw a plug rod.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Instead of
I hate
casting.
false casting to fish I don't see.
Yeah.
When you're dredging, like the holly, like in a stormy day and you're back in the mud or a channel somewhere, that is I hate it. Like Nikki, I'd rather put a big black hoagie worm on a spinning rod.
But it's one of those things that you get educated, and especially tournament fishing. I think I became a better guide and better at things because of pressure, because of a tournament situation, having to figure it out.
Right. That's what
and,
Mitch Howell said about you. Regardless of the conditions, Mitch said you're a fishy guy. You can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, like with Azo, everybody thought all of the fish that we would catch was in the hole or it was off the Cape dredging. And the truth is, not all of them were.
Right.
There were times where we would get around somebody out at. I remember John Donnell and Bim Gill were out there. One day, we just started pulling up, kind of say hello, not something you do nowadays, but back then we used to be pretty friendly on the water.
Sure.
You see somebody, hey, how you doing? You'd talk for a few minutes. And I'll never forget, we pulled up there and, John's like, oh, Randy, hey, man, what's going on? And
What are you doing here?
and I go, you guys seen anything? Nah, there's a couple of fish here. And I'm like, hey, so 60 feet. He's laying right to the left of their boat. And he's like, oh. And he casts, the next thing you know, we're hooked up. And John's like, what? Oh,
That's my fish.
what are you doing? We're like, see ya. And that's how it was.
What was it like to communicate with Azo when he didn't speak English very well? He spoke enough to understand what you were saying.
It was interesting because it almost felt like I had to speak like a different language, and it wasn't Japanese, and it wasn't Spanish, and it was just, he could understand it. Like Azo would be in a slump, where things weren't working, and I'd be like, Azo, what's the matter? What's going on? I told you, to the left, and you're throwing it to the right. And, I said 40 feet. You threw it 90 feet. And he turns around, he says, my brain is very smart. I'm a very smart man, but my arm, it's no working.
He's a funny man.
So
how come you never won a whitefish tournament?
Well, when I was fishing with Azo, I was fishing with Carlos Solis. So
During the whitefish tournaments, the Gold Cup. Yeah.
And we just never, we had a lot of bad luck. I had one day he fell hooked a big fish and fell in the bottom of the boat. I thought he broke his back.
Oh.
And, we lost one of my rods and a Seamaster. And, I was trying to keep up with the rod, and he's on the deck, and he's out of breath. And, I'm thinking he's really hurt. So we just had crazy things happen,
Right. It's hard. It's hard.
That's like asking, why didn't you win a medal at the Olympics?
Well, there's a reason why. And a lot of times, look, it is a team event. And Nikki and I were speaking about this morning, and you and I were speaking about the energies between angler and guide. And sometimes that combination just doesn't work. So maybe had you fished with Azo in a whitefish tournament, you would have won that whitefish tournament. But he had Kenny Collette.
Yeah.
And talk to me about that dynamic between angler and guide when it's really happening and when it's not.
Well, for example, with Carlos, great friend, great client, phenomenal angler. He can throw 80 feet left or right, doesn't matter.
He's ambidextrous.
Yeah, and can put it where it needs to be. But we just never had it all come together in the Gold Cup. And I think one year we might have won the biggest fish or something, but it just never worked out. And then with Azo, Kenny Collette, who I knew from Fort Lauderdale, was coming down, and I kind of put those two together to fish in the Gold Cup. In the Gold Cup. So they were kind of doing what we were doing in the Holly, kind of the same general area, and Kenny had his spots and stuff. Mm-hmm. But they developed that chemistry, and they had it going on. And the last thing I was going to do was, ditch Carlos to fish with Azo.
Right.
You just didn't do that.
And then he fished with Pat Ford during the Golden Fly.
So the Golden Fly comes along, and I got Pat Ford in the early years. And unfortunately, this guy Andy Mill was fishing too. And between Hoover or Spear, whichever one you were fishing with, I think both of them back then maybe.
And Tahara. Yeah, Tahara and I won that 5 times together.
It was just about beat Andy. It wasn't about winning. It was, if we beat Andy, we're probably going to get there. And with Pat, for example, we were talking.
He was close. You guys were close a number of times.
We caught a 155 one morning, sun up, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to do it. This is the year we're getting Andy. There's no way he's catching a 155. But you're allowed 5 weight fish. So what happens, Andy comes in with a 125 and a 115. And then the next day, he's got a 130 and a 95. So now our 155 is out the window, and we need now 4 over 100 to compete. And one morning with Pat Ford out off the beach, we had 2 fish in a row, and they were good ones, 125, 135, and you had to lip gaff them. And I went to lip gaff this thing, the first one, and I lip gaffed it, and I pulled it in the boat on the deck, and when I did, he kicked his tail, and he just kept going, like shot right over the bow,
Back into the ocean.
back into the water, and broke us off. And I just looked at Pat, and I went, "You have got to be kidding me." Like, we just spent an hour and a half catching this thing, and, you know, you're that close.
Right.
You know, I've already got the points on the board because now all we got to do is strap this thing and we're good to go.
Right.
30 minutes later, we do the exact same thing again. 2 in a row that day. So, you know,
That's just-
Stuff like that.
That's just energy and bad luck.
you
man.
just look at these tournaments and you go, well, yeah, I don't know how many times I was bridesmaids in the Golden Fly. I hate to think. Probably quite a few. And then I can't blame Pat, you know.
No.
It wasn't his fault. He did a great job, and, you know, it just didn't work out.
You know, it's interesting in that it's really hard to close the deal, regardless of what kind of competition it is. We're watching the Olympics now, you know, and a skier from Switzerland, Odermatt, in the fourth to the last gate, he squashes out and is out of the course, and he's trained his entire life. Look, I was a skier. I skied in 2 Olympics and 4 World Championships. So let's just say in each of those events, the downhill was around 2 minutes. So the 2 Olympics, that was 4 minutes. My entire life from the age of 9 years old until when I retired at 28. All that period of time came down to 4 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And in fishing, it's hard to close the deal. You're leading a tournament, it's hard to close. A tennis tournament, it's hard to close. And until you're at the buzzer a lot, it's hard to understand the dynamics of closing. And the whole team environment with fishing, to me, is fascinating because it is a team. You can't catch the fish that you can't see. You got to have the right guide, and the angler or the guide's got to have the right angler. And that is magic when you find that window like you had with Azo.
Well, and the first one's the hardest, you know, to win and know you can win. I remember fishing with the swordfish tournament that we won, the Alamorada swordfish tournament. The guy and his son never even seen a swordfish, let alone caught one. Thought it would be cool to fish this tournament. It was out of the Chica. And, you know, it was a father and son. They listened when we got out there, and I explained, here's what we're going to do, here's how it's going to work. And they were receptive to all of it, and they listened, and they didn't make any mistakes. And sometimes it looks so easy, and yet they just understood what we were doing, even though they hadn't done it. And, you know, everything went right. We caught 7 swordfish. I think we hooked 7, and these guys won the tournament and the whole deal. And the guy, when we started, he had no intentions of being competitive or winning. He's like, we've never fished a tournament. We certainly don't expect to win. And I was looking at it as, well, it's a charter for 2 nights. So at least I'm going to get, you know, paid for a couple of days to go fishing. We're going to have a good time, and maybe we'll catch one big enough to eat. And we end up winning.
So here's my question here. You can win an offshore tournament with a neophyte, but you can't win an inshore tournament with somebody who doesn't know how to do this, and it's not a refined angler. So when you're offshore in those tournaments, is it the boat and the captain that's winning those tournaments? How much of that, and the crew, but how much are those tournaments and big fish caught by the angler and the angling skill of the person who's got the rod in their hand?
Well, let's face it, the tarpon tournaments, bonefish tournaments are technical, and they're technical to the angler. So that angler has to understand what to do. Sailfishing, for the example, kite fishing, you know, the boat is going to back up on the fish, but not really much, because what we've all learned, the harder you back down chasing a sailfish, potentially you're spooking other fish around you. So you look at these guys that win, they walk softly.
Are they dead boating those fish?
No, but they move very slow. They think about, you know, I want to turn the boat this way, and if I do that, the kites are going to go this way, maybe to get in front of another fish coming. They're not racing around. You know, everything's kind of done slower, and it's done a little more methodical, where you're thinking about that next fish to bite. So your angler is really just winding them in, keeping the line tight, and
But you're still fishing.
you're still fishing.
Right.
And
You still have lines in the water.
you have lines in the water because a lot of these tournaments are 6, 7 lines. So you've got 2 kites with 3 baits, and usually a guy in the bow with a flat line. So one of the biggest things is just not getting tangled up. Once you start turning on fish and you've got 3 or 4 on,
I can't even imagine.
now it becomes another problem to the captain because you're spread out in different directions. You got the kites wrapped around your tower. You're going in circles to try to get that release on the fish next to the boat. So a lot's going on with the captain then, but the angler still, his part, I can't let the fish get under the boat. I can't get tangled up with the next guy that's got a fish on. So the angler does become very important in being skilled how to fight his fish and how to keep from getting tangled or losing it. So it's a different
Different type.
It's a whole different experience because that is a combination of the guy driving the boat to keep you from being too far stretched out.
And the mates.
And the mates and everybody working together.
Yeah.
So you got like 8 people who are really important of managing all of that going on. Whereas the inshore stuff, it's a guide. I can only get you there.
Right.
It is 100% up to you when you throw that fly that you get them to bite it. And our success is coming from you being on the bow and making a good cast. I can just take you to where I think they're going to be, type of thing.
You ever see any square groupers out there?
I have a grouper story when I first moved here that I haven't really told much, but
Perfect.
so
The time is right.
I told you when I came down here, I was at Bud Mary's and Oz Keggy, who was from Fort Lauderdale. I moved down here with him. Well, I have a little flats boat, and I bought a Terry bass boat that was kind of a popular skiff down here at the time. And I paid $5,000 for a boat motor and trailer, had an inline 90 on it, and had carpet all over it. And Jimmy Albright had one. So how bad could they be, right? So I got this skiff, and I'm learning how to go bone fishing and go learn my way around because I can already see these guys are independent. They got their own thing going. This is pretty exciting. And I had caught a few bonefish, already, and I just thought it was cool. So I'm at Bud Mary's. I'm going to go bone fishing. It's dark. And I'm waiting for a little bit of daylight so that I can, leave the marina because I didn't really know my way around or that much anymore. And I wasn't going far, but I needed to see where I was going. So I was waiting. And evidently, everybody else was tired of waiting, unbeknownst to me. So I'm kind of sitting in my boat thinking about it. And all of a sudden, the lights turn on like I'm in a stadium. And there's DEA, there's cops, there's people. I'm surrounded with guns. I'm surrounded by these guys that aren't smiling. And there's 10 bales floating in the marina. I had no idea. They were 5 feet from my boat. So,
And they were waiting for somebody to come pick them up?
oh yeah, well, they thought that was me.
Yeah.
And once they figured out that I wasn't the guy, I was just in the way, they wanted to speed things up. And I'll never forget leaving in the dark and I'll just take my happy ass somewhere else, have a nice day, and I'm bouncing off of these things as I'm pulling away from the dock.
Wow.
And that just resonated with me to no end of, and that was big going on in the 80s
Right.
down here. I just wanted no part of it.
Did you watch the Netflix series Bloodline?
Yeah.
How
absolutely.
accurate was that?
Some of it was pretty accurate,
Right.
But it was a little hard to follow, some of it too. But I thought it was very interesting. I watched it all. And, there was certainly a different way of things happening down here back then. And, it wasn't like an outsider was really part of the family, when
Right.
you would come here. So,
Right. Same thing in Aspen. We had the same stuff out there.
yeah.
But I was fascinated by the Bloodline because, it was happening at the Murata Bay and, the
Yeah.
restaurants and the beaches. You could recognize, the small little fishing village of Isla Murata. That was a big drop-off point.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go back to your early years in Fort Lauderdale. Baseball was a big part of your life, as was fishing. Tell me about how you gravitated to fishing and ended up here in the Keys.
Well, like I was saying, my grandfather would take me to Loxahatchee when I was a kid, cane pole fishing off the bank. And I thought a mudfish was the coolest thing back then to catch. They were big. I couldn't catch a bass, but I catch mudfish now. So we would go on the weekends, and so I kind of got the taste of it doing that, never out of a boat. So as I started growing up, I was into bicycles. Like I had the coolest bicycle in town, and it was, had chrome wheels, and it was, just wasn't like the other bicycles. It was a Schwinn instead of a Huffy because they were cooler. And then I would take that bicycle and I'd go to the canals and I would, throw my Rapalas and stuff and catch snook and jacks and stuff. So I got a taste of it early as a kid fishing and knew that the canals weren't far from my house so I could get to them. So about 10 years old, I started seeing, these custom rods from Bill Boyd's Bait and Tackle. And I thought, man, I really want one of those. I can't have this cool bike and no cool fishing rod. But I can't afford them, and my mom wouldn't buy me a $200 custom Bill Boyd fishing rod. So I thought, all right, well, maybe she'll buy me the parts, and I can put a bicycle together. How hard's a fishing rod? So that's how it all started. She bought the parts for me, and I started putting them together, not really schooled by anybody, just going by what I've seen, or the rods that I had were, from Golden Triangle back then. And I thought something I could do. Well, I got into it, and it really became a big part of my life growing up because I would be in my bedroom wrapping rods and doing this stuff, and it just entertained me, and I was really fascinated with the whole thing, how cool they could be. I actually have two hanging up right there were the first two I ever wrapped, and I happened to get them back from one of my friends in the neighborhood that sold their house. And I played baseball. My grandfather loved baseball games. He would take me to Lockhart Stadium. We would watch the Yankees play, and I loved baseball. And I thought baseball was cool. So growing up, Little League and Farm League and Senior League and all of this stuff, I was a pitcher, and, I could hit pretty good back then. So it was kind of weird to be a pitcher and a good hitter. I would always, most pitchers will bat number 9. I would bat number 4. So it was kind of different, and it just followed me through high school, and later on I became really caught up in the baseball more than the fishing, but still doing all three: fishing, building rods, and baseball.
And so when did you move down here to the Keys?
81. So I actually worked for Tommy Green. He was my first kind of real paying job as a rod wrapper, and I had met him, and he had saw what I was doing, and I went to work for Tommy Green, which I thought, man, this guy is just the biggest bully, just a hard ass, and I didn't get it. No idea. I'm 16, 17, and this guy's busting my chops telling me I'm doing it wrong, and I got to come in on Saturday, and, all of these things. So anyways, I worked there for quite a while, and then, things happened, and, got busy with other stuff and moved on.
Did you ever snook fish with Tommy and George Copeland up there?
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of funny looking back on it because, at the end of the day, when they first started doing this stuff, it was like, you want to go snook fishing with us? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm in.
Snook kings of the world.
And we would go up there, Roosevelt Bridge, 10 cent, 25 cent, Flagler, all these different bridges. And I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm just trying to understand it all. And live mullet, live sand perch, 9-foot rods, 100-pound straight, 100-pound no leader, 100-pound to the hook. And when you hook these things, you just hung on. And, they would never bite away from the bridge. They always bite, going under, and kept going under. But we had some just phenomenal nights of doing that stuff with them. And Tommy was so nice that some days if we snook fished real late, he would let us take a nap in the bathroom about midday when we were, all
wrapping rods,
dragging. To be like, Tommy, I gotta sleep. He'd be like, go in the bathroom and lock the door. I'll give you 2 hours. So, and we're doing it again tonight. So he was very instrumental with me, wrapping rods and fishing and all that stuff. And so was George Copeland, And I had a store here back in 1986. I sold in 93 called World Class Outfitters. And when I sold the store, I called Tommy. Hadn't talked to Tommy in quite a while. And I called him and I thanked him for the education he gave me on the tackle business. And I didn't realize what I had learned from him as a kid. But I called him and I said, I get it. I know why you were the way you were. And I didn't realize what I had learned when I was working for you, but I do now because I've been in that position for the last 6 or 7 years, and I just sold my store, and I wanted to thank you for it. And it kind of opened the door for us to talk again, and I would talk to Tommy every couple of weeks, just, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And, we kind of created another friendship again.
Right.
But it was, I guess, about 80. I went to Fort Lauderdale College and played ball there, and their team was like the Bad News Bears. It was terrible. and I think it was for a reason with the scout. His name was Fred Ferrara, and I was at a get together at Lockhart Stadium. They would do these in spring training. They would do like camps where guys could come and train and like a little tryout for things. And he said, where are you going to school? I said, I'm not in school. He goes, well, you're never going to play ball unless you go to school. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm a free agent. I want to go play. And I was a pitcher and, threw very hard, mid-90s and, a little bit faster in high school. So he writes down on this piece of paper, the coach at Fort Lauderdale College, he goes, here, go see this guy. You're going to school. And I went and I signed up for college and I got my books and my uniform and everything and played a year there. And didn't have a very good season, lost a lot of games. But I had one of the coaches come over and say, hey, if you want to play for us next year, we'd love to have you. I thought, well, that was kind of cool. And I went to Broward Community College next year and signed out of there and played with the Florida State League, the Dodgers, and Vero. And the next year, I threw my arm out. I made a pitch, and my arm wasn't working anymore. And didn't know why. Just knew that I had to lift it up to move it around, and, something wasn't right. Well, in the early 80s, nobody knew anything different. Oh, it's your rotator cuff, it's Tommy John, it's your elbow, it's something. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. There's more going on than that. Well, I just figured, when you're on a pedestal like I was and you fall, I'm at the bottom of the barrel. I'm going to have to start all over again because I have an injury. I'm a young guy, and I didn't think it was going to work. And Oz Keggy, who I, kept real close with and friendly, says, hey, I'm moving to the Keys. You want to go? And I was like, yeah. I've had it with Fort Lauderdale, and I want something new. And I guess I was a little depressed because I got hurt. Never thought I was going to not play baseball. That was always going to be my thing.
Right.
And so I moved here with him, and I want to say like 4th of July weekend, 81, somewhere in there. And it all started from there, and had a little rod shop, started, doing more in the fishing, and just kind of fit in, met Billy, and, the
rest was history.
Everybody has fishing rods that are broken.
Yeah.
And everybody sees a fancy rod they can't afford, but they want one. So...
And that's how you got started. I mean, you made mention that your mom wouldn't buy you this rod, but she bought you the parts at 10 years of age, and you started wrapping rods, and here you are, 50-some years later, with the Isla Morada Fishing Outfitters. I mean, I remember you built me a bunch of rods when Azo was bringing blanks in from Japan.
Yeah.
Beautiful, and a couple sage rods with my fancy name and all the stuff that you do so well. It's been a hell of a ride for you, Randy.
Oh, it has. I don't have any regrets, and I kind of do what I do. If I can do it, I want to do it. I don't want to wait and do something later.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people view it differently. Oh, I can't do that until this. Oh, I can't do that because I don't have the money. I can't do this. And if I can figure out a way to do it, I'm doing it.
Do you still love fishing more than ever?
Yeah. What I don't like right now is struggling. I don't like to go fishing and struggle. And
when it's bad conditions and you got to really put your head down and grind.
But you know what?
That's every day.
For us.
Bad conditions never scared me. Matter of fact, I learned how to guide, and probably one of my biggest successes was from bad weather fishing, like bone fishing.
Rick Murphy's like that.
Yeah.
You have a terrible tarpon day. It's raining. There's a hurricane coming, tropical storm.
They're catching fish.
Oh my God.
And so
it's
is Randy.
unbelievable, and that's what.
Well,
you're really good at that too.
I looked at my calendar and I went, if I don't start fishing when the weather's bad, I'm not gonna win at this. I'm gonna starve because I got more cancellation because the wind blows.
Yeah.
Or it's a bad day. So I was at the Lorelei, blowing 30, easy. Nobody went, and my guy shows up and he goes, "Well, what are we gonna do?" I go, "I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're going to go bone fishing, and I'll make this real easy. You can pay me $50 a bonefish, or you can pay for the trip," which we were just doing a half day, was like $200, $225 or something back then. And he kind of looks at me funny, and he goes, "50 a bonefish?"
I'll take the 50, he says.
He goes, "Well, God, I don't know. When can I tell you?"
Right now.
I said, I was chomping. I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see if I could do this. I said, "I'll tell you what, you can do it when you catch your first one. How's that?" So he goes, "Let's go." So we go to and we get there and we throw out the shrimp. And within a few minutes, we got them on. I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "I think your half day's just fine." I said, "Okay." We caught 20. So
this is your mistake. You should have said, "I want to know right now," before he caught that first fish.
I didn't. Look, had he said that and it didn't work out, I didn't,
I want to have him dish out.
I wasn't looking for the failure. I was looking for the pressure to do it, and knew I could.
Yeah. And
it was certainly the right condition. So when we got back, again, I'd put the boat on the trailer. Billy goes, "Well, how'd you do?" I go, "Well, you're not going to like this." He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, we went bone fishing." And he goes, "You smacked them, didn't you?" I go, "Well, we caught quite a few." And, he had done that, was not something that he wasn't aware of. And when I told him what I did, he's like, "That's a good day." But certainly didn't tell me, go to and fish this corner or go to Tavernier. He would just say, "There's something you can go do. You can go fishing. You can take this man and have a good day."
Right, but he'd still let you figure it out on your own.
Right. And that was a big turning point for me when I knew I could catch them when the weather was bad. I thought anybody can catch them on a nice day.
Sure.
And then it turned into snook and redfish and tarpon, and you just start broadening what you're going after, and especially tarpon fishing. If you found where there was a bunch of tarpon and the weather got bad, well, they didn't go anywhere. They're not going to roll, but they're there. Mm-hmm. And just fish. Just go fishing. And I started fishing a lot more than waiting to see something.
You've got a great story. You got a great story. The big spectrum.
I got a great life. I mean, it's
do.
been a good ride being here. This was the best move I could have ever made in my life to be in a place like this and meet the people that I've met, have the success that I've had, and that's part of this story, is to share that with everybody and still be involved and have my identity still as a guide. But this is 40 years into it. I'm not going to fish 250 days anymore. Billy went to the end. He says, "I am not getting out of the skiff. When I can't do it, I'm out of the skiff, but I'm going to go to the end." And he did.
Right.
And God bless him, because that's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to do anything else.
It's amazing how he died on the pulling platform.
Yeah. He fished right up to the day he died.
Yeah.
We should all be so lucky.
Exactly.
Anything you'd like to add to this conversation?
I really like what you guys are doing. I think it's important for everybody to tell their story and for this to be captured and kept, because 30, 40 years from now, when people hear these stories and, they hear and see what things were like, I don't know that we're ever going to see the stuff that we got to see in the 90s and the big bonefish and all that stuff. Maybe, but there were some special moments and things that probably won't happen again.
Right.
And it's great that the people that did it can share, what it was like and what they've done and how they got there, and, maybe encourage more people to figure it out,
Well, it couldn't be more poignant than having Billy on the podcast a little bit more than a year ago, and he's now gone.
Yeah.
And for the rest of time, people are going to know his story from his lips.
And I watch these things, and listening to Billy's story and his podcast with you and talking about riding his horse to the Chica. We talked about a lot of things over the years. We never talked about him riding a horse to Chica. So it was interesting,
revealing
for me,
yes.
Knowing him as well as I did, and hearing his story and hearing more about his family. And, I knew him for 40 years, and there was something I didn't know, and he talked about it on your podcast. So I think it's just a great thing, and I'm really honored to be a part of it.
Well, we are grateful that you're here and joining us. Your story is very much deserved. You've got a big history, both offshore and inshore, and your name is very prevalent in the fishing capital of the world here in Islamorada, Florida. So thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
And many people think you're one of the fishiest guys down here, and you have a beautiful shop, and it's great to see you again. So thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it. I'm glad we got to do it.
For sure.
Thanks
Thank you,
so much.
Randy.
Awesome, guys.
Great knowing you.
Yeah, man.
Great having you as a good pal.
I appreciate it.
When I saw its West Side Story, when I saw it's just a